It is funny how life burns down your plans just to build something unexpected. And sometimes that something comes in the shape of a woman who terrifies you with her courage and disarms you with a single smile. The night it began was nothing spectacular, or maybe it was, depending on how you look at it. A fire ripped through a two-story house on the edge of Boston, and the fire trucks roared in. Among the chaos stood Captain Riley Hayes, 28, with soot streaking her face and determination hardening her jaw. She was the kind of woman who thrived on danger, who laughed at fear until she met the one person she could not control. Dr. Emily Carter. Emily, 27, was on air duty when Riley carried in a child she had just saved. The boy was coughing, trembling, clutching Riley's jacket like it was the last thing tethering him to life. Emily's hands moved quickly, her calm voice wrapping the room in steadiness. She looked up only once, and that single glance met Riley's fire-flecked eyes. Something inside both of them shifted. Neither of them admitted it then, of course. They were women who lived in different worlds. Riley's was all urgency, flames, and brute force against impossible odds. Emily's was science, precision, and the quiet strength of someone who fixed what others broke. But opposites, as life loves to prove, have their own gravity. The first time they spoke outside the hospital was weeks later, under the weak light of a street lamp. Riley leaned against her truck, exhaustion softening her features. Emily had just finished a double shift and was sipping cold coffee. "You patch people up," Riley said with a smirk. "I just break myself to get them to you." Emily chuckled, a sound that surprised even herself. "And yet you keep doing it. You must be either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most reckless. Why not both?" Riley's grin was tired, but her eyes lingered longer than they should have. It started with chance encounters, Riley dropping by the hospital under the excuse of checking on patients, Emily showing up at the firehouse with donated supplies. They told themselves it was coincidence, maybe even duty, but the truth was simpler and more dangerous. They wanted to see each other. Yet desire is never that simple. Emily had grown up with expectations, a family who believed love should look a certain way, follow a certain script. Riley, meanwhile, had her own scars, both on her body and in her heart. She had lost people to flames, to accidents, to choices she couldn't undo. She wasn't sure she had the right to hold someone as pure as Emily close. Still, the pull was undeniable. One late evening after a long shift, Emily found herself walking into the firehouse, unsure of why she was there. Riley was sitting alone on the back of the truck, looking out at the city lights. Her hair was damp from a shower, her shirt clinging slightly to her frame. Emily's breath caught not just because Riley was beautiful, but because she looked so heartbreakingly human in that moment. "You ever think about how fragile we all are?" Riley asked without turning. "One spark, one wrong move, and it's over." Emily stepped closer, her voice gentle. "That's why we keep showing up. To fight the fire. To fix what's broken. To remind people they're not alone." Riley finally turned, and something in her expression cracked open. "And who reminds you?" The silence between them carried weight. Emily's heart pounded as if demanding an answer neither of them was ready to give. She sat beside Riley, close enough that their shoulders brushed. The warmth of contact was electric. For weeks after that, they danced on the edge of something dangerous and sweet. A look that lingered too long. A hand brushing by accident. Conversations that slipped deeper into the night than either intended. They told themselves it was nothing, that it couldn't be anything. And yet, in every quiet moment, the truth screamed louder. The turning point came one stormy night when the fire alarm blared at 2 a.m. Riley was called to a factory blaze, one of the worst in years. Emily, already at the hospital, braced for casualties. Hours later, Riley stumbled in, smoke-blackened, carrying a fellow firefighter with blood trailing down his arm. Emily's hands flew to help, but her eyes locked on Riley, and panic tore through her chest. She saw beyond the soot and grit. She saw the fragility Riley had spoken of, the risk she faced every day. The thought of losing her was unbearable. When the chaos subsided, Emily found Riley alone in the hallway, slumped against the wall. Without thinking, she rushed to her, cupping her face. Their foreheads pressed together, and for the first time, neither pretended. "I can't keep pretending I don't care," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Riley's hand found hers, rough but gentle. "Then don't." Their lips met, tentative at first, then desperate. as if both had been drowning and finally found air. It wasn't fireworks or some cinematic explosion. It was quieter, deeper, the kind of kiss that rewrote truths. But love never comes without cost. The kiss should have been the answer, the release, the clarity they both craved. But reality has a way of snapping its fingers at the worst moments. Emily pulled back too quickly, guilt clouding her eyes. Riley's chest tightened because she knew that look. It was the same one she'd seen in burning buildings. When someone realized escape might be impossible. Emily whispered, almost to herself, "What if my family finds out? What if they never forgive me?" Riley swallowed hard, forcing a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. "Then maybe I'm not worth the fire you'd have to walk through." Emily wanted to argue, but her fear strangled her voice. She left that night with her heart splitting in two, leaving Riley staring at the empty hallway, convinced she had just watched the only real thing she'd ever wanted slip away. Days bled into weeks. Emily buried herself in work, her white coat a shield against the storm inside. Riley threw herself at every call, running into flames as if pain could silence the echo of Emily's absence. Both women pretended, to the world and to themselves, that nothing had happened. But silence can be its own kind of scream. Then came the call that changed everything. A gas explosion in a downtown apartment building. The fire was merciless, devouring floors faster than crews could reach them. Riley's team charged in, but when a section of the ceiling collapsed, she was trapped. Bruised, coughing, but still alive. At the hospital, chaos reigned as patients flooded in. Emily froze when she saw the paramedics wheel Riley through the sliding doors, half conscious, her uniform scorched. For a moment, everything else disappeared. She was at Riley's side before she even realized she was moving. "Stay with me," Emily demanded, her voice shaking as she pressed oxygen to Riley's lips. "Don't you dare leave me, Hayes." Riley's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, but the corner of her mouth curled. "Dr. Carter." Bossy as ever. Emily's tears spilled freely. In that instant she no longer cared who saw, no longer cared about rules or fear or the walls her family had built around her. All she saw was the woman who had risked everything for strangers, the woman who had unknowingly set her heart on fire. Riley was stabilized, and as she lay in the recovery room, Emily sat by her bed, clutching her hand. Hours passed, the world outside moving on, but inside that room time belonged only to them. When Riley finally stirred fully awake, Emily was still there. Her hair was a mess, her eyes red from crying, but her grip was steady. "You shouldn't be here," Riley rasped. "I should be exactly here," Emily countered. "And I should have been brave enough to say it sooner." Riley searched her face, waiting for hesitation, for retreat. But all she saw was raw, unflinching truth. "I'm scared," Emily admitted, her voice trembling but firm. "Scared of what people will say. Scared of how hard this might be. But I'm more terrified of losing you. And that's the one thing I can't survive." For the first time in weeks, Riley let herself breathe. She lifted Emily's hand to her lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles. "Then let's be scared together." The road after that wasn't smooth. Emily's parents resisted, friends whispered, and Riley's fellow firefighters teased with questions too sharp to be jokes. But amid the judgment, there were also allies, colleagues who cheered for them, friends who offered quiet acceptance, strangers who simply smiled when they saw two women holding hands. And through it all, Riley and Emily learned the rhythm of each other's lives. Emily would sit at the firehouse, sharing late-night takeout with Riley's crew, laughter echoing against the truck bays. Riley would appear in the ER after grueling shifts, leaning against the counter just to steal a smile from Emily. They fought, they healed, they stumbled, but they always came back to the same truth. The fire between them was not one to be extinguished. Months later, on a crisp autumn evening, Emily found herself standing outside the firehouse again. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Riley walked out, her jacket slung carelessly over her shoulder, hair catching the last light of the day. Emily stepped closer, her heart racing in the way it always did when Riley was near. "You know," she said softly, "if someone told me a year ago I'd fall for a reckless firefighter, I would have laughed in their face." Riley's grin was slow, teasing, but her eyes burned with something deeper. "And yet here you are. Heart first, logic nowhere to be found." Emily reached out, lacing her fingers with Riley's. The touch was natural now, like breathing. Here I am. Exactly where I belong. They kissed then, not desperate, not hesitant, but steady, a promise. Around them the city pulsed with life, indifferent to their story. But for Riley and Emily, the world had narrowed to this moment. This choice, this love that had demanded everything and in return, given them more than they ever thought possible. Because sometimes the heart chooses fire. Sometimes it chooses risk. But if you are very, very lucky, it chooses right. And for a doctor and a firefighter who never thought they would fall in love, that choice was each other. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.